they wondering what's all that ruckus. That's a 18-wheeler, semi-trailer, I'ma keep it trucking. Big rig driving, cargo hauling, I'ma keep it trucking. U-Haul moving, F-150, let's just keep it trucking. Out here busting moves, I ain't got time for no discussion.
Welcome back to Trucking Fitness Radio, the #1 driver's health and fitness podcast in the world. My name's Dr. Mark Manera. I'm the founder and CEO of Supply Chain Fitness, and I am pumped to have you listening to this episode. As you're aware, we're on a mission to make the trucking industry a healthier place, and this podcast is just one of the ways that we're doing it. Today, we've got an awesome guest on the show, Jerome Redmond, President and CEO of American Truck Training and Chairman of the Board of Directors for the Commercial Vehicle Training Association. I'm excited to talk with you. Jerome, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I guess before we dive too deep, I did say, I warned you that this was a fitness podcast. So I got to ask, what do you like to do for fitness, for exercise? What's your go-to?
Well, I tell you what, I would love to say that I'm like working out every day, pumping iron and just getting it, man. But I'm not. But I will say I do some do a lot of walking with my wife, and
Awesome.
I've trained under that Body for Life system. It's an older system from way back in the day, but that's something I'm about to get started back in. I'm trying to practice what I preach. I love talking about health and fitness. But lately, sometimes I've not done it. But that's part of what we're talking about today. We're talking about health and fitness for the trucking industry.
Yeah, well, and I tell drivers this when I'm on a call with them is that most people don't have the goal to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. So you don't have to think your training and your day-to-day life has to look like that. So I go on walks with my wife as well. That's one of my favorite parts of our evening routine. And I think that's an awesome way to get some exercise. But no, I like to ask that question to start the podcast. And,
Sure.
I think when I bring another guest on, any guest on, especially the first time I'm talking with you, I always like to hear, the starting story. And, I'd love to kind of hear how you got into, the world of truck driving training and truck driving school. And, I know you started with Roadmaster and then kind of it evolved from there, but tell me your story. How'd you get into trucking?
Well, first of all, my dad was a truck driver. My
Okay.
dad was a CDL driver. And so what's remarkable, or I always think of myself as an American dream story, but what's remarkable about my story is my dad started off as a CDL driver. And I remember when I was a kid, he would say to my mom, "Hattie, if I can just get my CDL," as if we got a CDL or he got a CDL, we were going to Disney World the next day or something. What is the CDL thing, and why is it like is it magic or something? What, But what it meant for him was that he was going to be able to provide for our family,
Yep.
and he did. And so what's unique about him is that he's 8th grade educated. In our state of Oklahoma, you don't have to have high school diploma to get your commercial driver's license. In other states you do, but in Oklahoma you don't have to. And so had it not been for that stipulation, my dad wouldn't have been able to feed our family the way that he intended. And so he did that. Things worked out. When I got older, I got into the industry with Roadmaster, and I was an emissions rep, not an actual truck driver at first, So, but I realized on my second day of employment, I'll never forget this, that one of the vice presidents of Roadmaster said to me, after I asked him, I said, "Is there opportunity for me to grow within the company?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "But let me understand this correctly." And I remember how hard my dad had to work. I said, "So we just need to take well-deserving good people, train them, and there's plenty of jobs out there. I'm like a gabillion jobs out there available." And this vice president said, "Yes." I said, "I'm going to be your #1 guy." On day 2 of my employment, I totally sold myself out to this. I mean, I was sold. I said, "I'm going to be #1. I believe in what you guys do. I know 5 guys on my block would want to get their CDL so they can make this type of money." And so that's where my career started. I was very passionate about it. We turned the company at Roadmaster into doing very well. After so many years, done great with them, parted in very good terms, and restarted the old American Truck Training back in 2012. In 2015, I bought the company from the old owner. He was retiring, and the rest is history. And here I am today.
Wow. So your dad, was he over the road? Was he a local driver, regional, couple days out, couple days back? What was that like?
Actually, he worked for the city of Tulsa.
Okay.
And so what he did, he worked during the daytime, but in the evening he was a janitor. So I got a lot of, and so I got to actually work with him in the evenings as well as a
Okay.
janitor. So when I introduce myself to the students, and still to this day I do this, I'll say, "Hi, I'm Jerome Redmond. I'm the janitor of the school." And they look. Some folks look puzzled, like, "Well, you're wearing slacks, but man, you're nifty. You're a nicely dressed janitor, I guess." But I say that in honor of my dad, because I learned a
Yeah.
lot from him working with him. Like for those of us who worked with a parent or grandparent sometime in our life, and so yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, the work ethic of
yes,
driving all day and then going
yes,
and working and driving and
yeah.
you know, me sitting here as an adult thinking, oh, I gotta go at night and be a janitor doesn't sound nearly as fun as telling your kid, hey, you're gonna go to work with dad and we're gonna go
Right.
clean, clean the building, stuff like
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Got a
So
lot of great lessons out of that.
yeah. So walk me through. So you started working. So ATT was a company previously. Like you didn't start the company. You worked
Right.
into it, and then
Right.
over time, the owner was like, "Hey, I want to get out of this," and you
Sure,
purchased
sure.
the.
So I've
How?
ran
Yeah.
the company. Yeah, I've been running trucking school since 2009.
Okay.
And so in 2012, when this came up as an opportunity, I honestly said, "Hey, Roadmaster, I am going to part ways." They said, "Well, go." They were very positive and very encouraging, and surprisingly very supportive, right? You
All
don't
right.
want to be a
Yeah.
competitor, right? And but a competitor down the road. So they were. I was in Tulsa. I moved back to Oklahoma City, and that's where we restarted American Truck Training, and at that time we had a decision to make whether we kept the company name or we start with brand spanking new. And I said, why don't we keep it as American Truck Training? Because it means something to me. Because I represent the American dream. Where else could this happen where a guy with no money, no anything, start from scratch and build his way up to buying a company and running it into a multi-million-dollar corporation? That's just not an everyday story. So
Uh-huh. That's awesome. And so right now, ATT is you guys have one school, correct, in
yes.
Oklahoma? Okay. And
Yes, and we're
what's
expanding.
yeah.
Yeah, what's the outlook? Is that what you
Yeah,
want? That
what's the vision? What's
what's the
the next
vision, right?
yeah, 5 to 10 years look like?
Yeah, yeah. So I have one just basic goal:
Okay.
world domination.
All
Basically,
right. That's just a small one. Just a
it's just
small
like,
goal.
I didn't say universe domination.
Okay, okay.
I'm figuring, let me just start with Earth, right? I mean, just Earth. I mean, not asking for much, So anyway, so yes, that's the goal. The goal is to copy cookie cutter what we're doing here in Oklahoma City in areas like Houston, Texas. That's one of our next places we're going. We're already working with some wonderful people in Houston to make that happen. I won't say who, but there's a celebrity endorsement in there as well, which is pretty awesome. But then
Nice.
that's going to be part of that whole deal. Then there's Tulsa. We're looking at going back into Tulsa, and there's some other places around the country that we've already got our eyes on that we're going to expand into.
Awesome. So it's so going from hey, you've got everything locked down in
Yes,
OKC. Now
yes,
let's start spotting
that's
and
right.
going. So is the goal a couple a year? What is how quickly is expansion in your head go?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, expansion is happening now. The Houston school will
Uh-huh.
be open by the end of the year.
Oh,
For sure.
awesome. Awesome. Okay.
Guaranteed lock. And we're looking at putting multiple schools in the Houston area. So
Okay.
that's already part of the business plan. Plus, we have, like many companies, we have a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year goal. So by year 10, I really want American Truck Training to be everywhere. I absolutely, and I'm not just saying this, Mark, I absolutely love helping people. It is my drug of choice. I love it. It's like, oh, so,
I love
and
that.
it's just part of my genetic makeup, and that's just the way I am, and I love it. It never gets old watching someone get their CDL and saying something to the effect of, "You changed my life," or
Yeah.
"This is going to set my family up," or when they come back and tell me how great they're doing. That never gets old. So every day I get to wake up like many of those cool stories we've heard in our country, wake up and do something I truly love and do. And that's kind of where it kind of, I guess, the passion showed, and unfortunate by my peers to be voted as or elected as chairman of the board for Commercial Vehicle Training Association.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to go into next
Sure,
because honestly, it's something in just general. And I'm a newbie in the industry. I've been in for a
sure,
couple of years, but I'm learning every single day. And so, it's not been an association that I've dove too deep into. I've got some
sure.
friends, a friend of mine, Dave Dine, who is
Mhm.
runs the Next Generation Trucking, and Lindsay Trent as well. So I know a couple of people who are in that realm. But I'd love to kind of hear more about the how you got into it, the association in general, and yeah, tell me about it.
Well, American Truck Training has always been kind of a part of CVTA, or Commercial Vehicle
Mhm.
Training Association. But when I got involved, I saw that this was a place. Well, first of all, the Commercial Vehicle Training Association is the largest association for truck driving schools. Between all of our schools, hundreds of schools, we train about 100,000 drivers per year. That's
Wow.
a lot of folks. But the need for drivers is continual. As you know, folks come in, folks get out. And it's just
Hmm.
one of those things. Health does play a part in that as well. That's what we're in part talking about today. But CBTA is the largest of those type of associations. So when I got involved, what made me excited was that I saw that here we are, all these trucking schools together. We're still competitors, but yet we help each other. That's the one thing that everyone, as consensus throughout the organization, said we're all there to help each other succeed and make safety our number one goal.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's so. How long have you been on the board of directors?
Yeah, I've been on the board of directors for a few years, and as of about somewhere around 10 months ago, I was elected as the chairman of the board. And
Awesome.
some of the neat things that we do as an association, just FYI, is we'll get together, we'll work together on policies politically, and
Yep.
these are mostly bipartisan things because everyone loves truck drivers, so, especially when COVID happened, right? Man, I
Yeah,
tell you what,
exactly.
that I hated that COVID did what it did, but I love how folks responded to the trucking industry. They understood how important truck drivers were, and in fact, they went as far as to celebrate them. And I really thank the American public for that. But anyway, so we do a lot of things. We get together, we work out policies throughout on a state level, federal level. We go to DC and talk with our folks in lawmaking, and we get things done. Like for instance, the entry level driver training rule that just came out February 7th of this year,
Hmm.
which basically states throughout our country, you have to now be able to have to go through an approved program or a training provider that's on the registry in order to get your CDL. The days are gone where you can have your brother's cousins uh, friend's dog's gerbil train you how to get a CDL. It's not that we're trying to overregulate or anything like that. We just want the roads safer.
Yeah.
We know that if you have an approved program, that's going to be a higher likelihood that you can be a safe driver. So,
Yep.
and so that when that came about, it was a lot of interest, a lot of buzz, and a lot of good things happened as a result. And now we can report that we believe our roads are much safer.
So now with that is that's something that the people who did go to their mother's brother's gerbil to get the CDL training, do they have to go back and get recertified, or they've been grandfathered in,
Our
now it's going
grandfather,
forward?
yeah.
Okay, good. I
Yeah,
gotcha.
we didn't want to make the whole
No,
country.
I mean, yeah, no, I mean that would be a big task.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think I look at it, I think there's a you with any change like that, you can look at it from both perspectives and see an argument of saying, okay, yeah, I know people need help, but from a safety side of things, and I kind of look at it as similar to like the DOT physical, right? You've got people who are failing it and stuff like that, and that's sad because they drive for a living. That's that they
Uh,
keep
sure,
roof
sure.
over their kids. But on the other side, like we want our highway safe, right? We want, there's a reason why there's standards there, and so I think that's interesting, and I know um I just kind of being in the realm, and I'm not super deep into it. I know, and I mess up this acronym every time. FMCSA,
No,
correct?
that's right. You got it
All
right.
right,
Yeah,
FMCSA,
you're
got
a
it.
lot
All
better
right.
than I did the first few
Don't
times.
don't try to tell me. Don't try to get me to say what that means. Federal motor carrier. Well, okay.
Now you
All
there.
right.
Administration. You got it.
There we go. So, I know obviously they have a big part in building out the curriculum, or at least what you guys need to train throughout is at ATT is school around 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks. How long? Okay.
Yeah,
So in
46.
that, okay, so 4 to 6 weeks, the curriculum is built out in, at least things that you have to check off the list. But how do you balance at ATT the yes, we need to check off these are really big things from a safety perspective, but learning, but then also some of those, I guess, other life lessons that
Yes.
just, yeah, help drivers that they need to know to live a higher quality life out on the road. How do you balance that?
Well, two things. One, it breaks up the monotony of training.
Yeah.
You know, if you want your students to really absorb the information, it can't be all very boring, the same things over and over and things like that. If you ingest things like certain carriers like Werner Enterprises, they have a what's called Life on the Road series, which allows a student or a new driver a peek into the life of a truck driver, do's and don'ts, things of that nature. So thankfully, they're really kind to all those trucking schools, and they give that information out freely for us to kind of use. But again, there could be more of a deep dive into that stuff, but they at least want to give you a general idea. Health and wellness may be a small segment of that, a piece.
We got to
but
beef that up. Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right,
go for
right.
it.
It's a little bit. It may be
Yeah.
a little generic, but at least gets a person to think about when they're out on the road. Hey, I need to plan and think about what I'm eating and putting into my body so that I'll stay healthy. And what other things I can do is like you and I have talked about before is exercise. So anyway, but yeah, it's just interesting the way the industry has changed so much that we've had to just add these little pieces to our curriculum to just break up the monotony, and then
Yeah.
two, it's just pure education. And actually, there might be actually a third thing I didn't think about until just now, which is when we're talking to a student about coming to school, we want to and I don't want to speak for all schools, but I kind of can in this case to say that all of us want what's best for our students, right? So I can say that, right? So we also talk about these things like health and wellness, or these other things that are not specific training things, as kind of a lead in, or I wouldn't say sales, but it's more or less like hey, we don't just teach just this. We teach all the things you need to know as far as being a safe driver out there, and that includes non-specific training things, if that makes sense.
No, exactly. And I feel like just from like the dynamic of a teacher and
Yes.
like the instructor, I think there's probably a lot of things that between the PowerPoint slides that instructors who have lived that life, day to
Yes.
day for their part of their career, they share. And I think
Yes.
that goes probably a lot further than anything that someone could learn on a PowerPoint for a student.
I witnessed that in person today. I was just walking around the campus. I walked into the classroom. I walked to the back of the classroom. I like to peek in every once in a while to see what's going on. And one of the instructors was just giving a life lesson.
Mhm.
He was doing exactly what you just said there. It wasn't specific to curriculum, but it was something that they needed to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. So at the school level, or I guess at just ATT, is typically, is the average, person coming in, and there's probably some diversity here, but is it first career, second career, third, fourth, fifth career, and they're coming in later in age? Like, what's how big of a gap age wise do you see for people coming into your school?
Average age of a truck driver is somewhere around the age of 50, 55.
Yep.
So yes, second career is usually what you see. But what we're trying to do is trying to get more young folks, involved in the industry, because this also helps. This is a big push for me, and maybe I'm sure some other schools, is that instead of letting a young person kind of flail around the first few years right after high school, trying to figure out what they need to do and things, we present this as an option. Present this as an option, whereas they don't think when they think truck driver, they think older guy, right? No, I have a guy right now. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I won't mention his name, but But I remember him coming to our offices and starting, thinking about coming to school, and he was part he was part of a rock band, like a
Okay.
little rock band. He's going to be famous one day, right? Playing the bongos of all things, right? Like you're in a rock band, you're playing the bongos, you're probably not going. You're gonna be
Yeah.
like cut first,
Uh,
if you are to get famous.
yeah.
Well, for some reason, actually, for the reason of there was all of my admissions team were with other customers or other prospective students, and I thought, well, maybe help a guy out here. Let me talk to this guy and let me see if I can help him. It was that guy, and I remember thinking to myself, this guy's young. He's a little bit on the young side, early 20s, and he doesn't have any direction in life. I felt for him. I thought, you know what? If not this, what is he going to do? Continue to think he's going to be a rock and roll star? Well, you never know. It could happen, but
Yeah.
won't take away anyone's dream. But so I reluctantly went, okay, you know what? Let's give this guy a shot. Let's get him in school. He thanked me yesterday. It's been about 15 years ago. He
Wow.
thanked me yesterday on Facebook, and now he owns his own trucking company. He sees the world. He does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And I still tease him about those bongos from now time to time. You still play the bongos, buddy? He's like, no, I stopped. A long
He's
time ago.
gotta he's gotta get on TikTok and be the bongo trucker or something like that. He'll
Right,
just
right,
yeah, there
right,
you go.
right,
But gotcha. And so, I think is something that I'd be interested from your perspective of just like what do you feel like and obviously you don't have to point you can say this from an your experience in the industry or just as an industry as a whole, but what do you feel like is one of the biggest mistakes driving schools are making right now and
right.
some of the things that you've been thinking about how can we navigate this?
Sure, sure. Well, one of the things I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake because driving schools have their own perspective, but the bottom line is that they cover the curriculum that the FMCSA wants us to cover, or at least the topics, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things I see is that, in my personal experience, is that sometimes the schools rely solely on time in the truck, that is extremely important, by the way. That is not negating that at all. That is extremely important. But another thing I feel is important is how many times you do it, right?
Yeah.
Repetition. It's muscle memory. And muscle
Yep.
memory applies to not just working out or other
Everything.
things or sports. It applies to, in my opinion, truck driver training. So if you take a student and they spend like an hour in the truck working on something and teach them how to back a truck up, but half of that time or three-quarters of that time is you lecturing that person, and only 15 is actually doing a maneuver. What did you really spend? Did you really spend an hour? Yeah, technically, you can say yes, but I would argue he didn't get as much value, or he or she didn't get as much value. So I like to look at both. I like to look at time in the truck, but then also how many times you do it. So in our school, our goal is for a person to back a truck up 96 times before we
Wow.
allow them to test. And that's a tall order. But I know good and well per my statistics that if I get you to back a truck 96 times, it's your fault if you didn't pass your test.
Yeah.
It's not from not enough time or not enough practice. By that time, you're having nightmares about that truck.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and that's my goal for you to have nightmares about. I'm kidding,
Yeah.
it's just a metric I think that kind of helps. And every school has their own metrics per their
Yeah.
own or per their what they do. So
Yeah. Well, and I think, at the beginning of this podcast, obviously I said we're on
yeah,
a mission to make the trucking industry a healthier place. And I think if, we I've talked about these stats, I've thrown them all down people's throats to this
yeah,
podcast. I won't throw them out there again, but we know the stats are not pretty.
yeah,
And there's a lot of people who need help. And I think
yes,
if we're going to shift those stats and really, kind of talking that we talked about prior to the episode was shifting the identity of who a
yes,
professional driver is, I think
right,
it's going to have to come from multiple different angles
yeah,
of the industry. Drivers themselves,
yeah,
trucking companies, insurance companies, vendors, or
absolutely,
outside industry companies, and I also think CDL schools and training facilities have a role. And so I just wanted to kind of hear your perspective, both on the CVTA side of things, and then also just as president CEO of a trucking or CDL school. Like, what do you feel like? CDL school's role is in really shifting those stats.
Well, I will say this is our first role is to create safe drivers, right?
Yep.
But in also doing so, we have to think about not just it is sometimes tough enough to make sure that the person's trained enough to be able to pass the test, okay? Because we have to think in terms. Our first priority is to make sure they're safe and that they can pass the test. But we're also doing a disservice to them if we don't teach them things that will create retention in the trucking industry for the trucking companies and for that person. Like prior to the call, we talked about a little bit, we were just chit chatting a little bit, but about the life expectancy of a truck driver.
Yeah,
is what? How many years was it? Is
16 years less than the average population.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So how would this be if this was my sales pitch to say, hey, come join the trucking industry? You'll live 16 years less. No.
Yeah. Not great.
That's not great. So as schools, I feel that we don't necessarily, I wouldn't say bear the responsibility, but I would say we owe it to ourselves and owe it to our students to at least to give enough information about these things so that when they get into the trucking industry, it's not just the training side they know, it's the things that's going to make them completely successful and stay in the industry for a long term, because that's really how we're going to address the trucker shortage as it is. It's not just getting folks in, it's how do we keep them in, and being healthy is another way. Because if I gained 100 pounds while driving a truck or something, guess what I'm getting out of the truck, right?
Yeah.
So,
Which is unfortunately too common.
yes,
And
it is.
I always, the saying of, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And, when someone, someone's been in the industry 20, 30 years and they've gotten, this is their daily routine of driving a truck, and they've got their routines. They go to this truck stop, especially if they have a dedicated route. You know, Really, I look at it from a driving or trucking school perspective of saying, hey, let's get those, let's get day one them starting on those right habits. And yes,
Yeah.
safety needs to be a priority. All the passing the test needs to be a priority. And I love the way that you said that. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree with you on all of that. And I really enjoyed this podcast. And kind of the last question I always ask people is just, if you were to share one piece of advice to either a trucking company or a truck driver, I'll let you pick whichever one, just about living a healthier life out on the road, what would you say?
Well, I would say, kind of like you and I have chatted about, is just start small. Start small. Start doing something. The one thing you don't want to not do is nothing at all towards your health.
Yep. I love it. No, I completely agree. Something is always better than nothing. And you got to get I'll trucking reference, you got to get the tires turning, right? And then once you build the momentum, things get easier. And so I appreciate that. Jerome, thank you so much for coming on, and everyone listening. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
I love how they act like they been around, know when they wasn't. When everything was going downhill, you sat there and just watched me plummet. You never gave a hand, I made my own way out the dungeon. Now I'm making noise, they wondering what's all that ruckus. That's a 18-wheeler, semi-trailer, I'ma keep it trucking. Big rig driving, cargo hauling, I'ma keep it trucking. You hard moving, F-150, let's just keep it trucking. Out here busting moves, I ain't got time for no discussion.